Oh,
Okay. I guess let's go ahead and get started. Becky, ready when you are.
Okay. Do you want me to leave my camera on, or you want me to turn it off so that it doesn't get bogged down with all the people on?
However you want to do it. I'm probably going to go off camera.
Okay, I'll take it off just so that it doesn't weigh anything down. But I'll say hi first. So good afternoon. I think it's afternoon already. My name is Becky Danielson, and I'm the chair of the Fall Protection Council for SAIA. And there's been a lot of stuff floating out there about mostly the ANSI Z359.1 SRL standard update. And so back in November, I was asked to go speak at the Associated Subcontractors in Massachusetts because of all of the talk that has kind of gone on with that standard. There's also a couple others, that one brand new standard and an update to another standard. So I figured it might be a good idea for me to just run through some of the changes that you'll start to notice as the standard moves forward. And if you have questions, and Jackie, I don't know how you normally do this because I haven't done a webinar with you guys. If they wanted to use the chat feature, that's fine. Or do you want them to, I don't know if there's a raise your hand thing or something, or
However you want to do it is okay with me. If you want them to use the chat, that's fine. Maybe stop at certain points and ask if there's any questions, and then everybody can just chime in.
Okay.
I personally prefer a little more of a free flow type of atmosphere, but totally up to you how you want to run it.
No, I just whatever anybody wants to use. With some people are more comfortable with the chat feature, some people are more comfortable firing something off. But I'll make sure to stop between each segment that I have. But I do have a question thing at the end too. So I will. One of the things that I wanted to do was I want to just reiterate, and this is one of the things I talked with OSHA about, is that, you know, OSHA is a regulation that's enforced by law, right? And so when we look at what do we need, what's the bare minimum, what do we need to know? We need to know the OSHA standards, right? However, when it comes to fall protection, and I would say probably about 95% of the OSHA investigators that I've talked to, they're going to fall back on ANSI when it comes to fall protection, just because they're, you know, we've done a fairly decent job of really diving in and making it, trying to make it a little more clear, you know, on what actually needs to happen. But what is ANSI? So ANSI really, when you boil it down, it's a compliance board that sets the standards for manufacturing the equipment. But the people that sit on all the subcommittees have really, really spent a lot of time and energy looking at how can we get the information out there better? How can we get it so it's easier to understand, and understanding the things that are actually happening out in the field. And so that's kind of how they've started to look at the standards themselves. So we're going to start with Z359.14. Now this is the previous, how it was laid out. So there were types of self-retracting devices. So there was the self-retracting lanyard with retrieval or rescue capability, and then the SRL-LE, which is what you currently see on a lot of SRLs out there today. It was also based on, you know, the distance, the arrest distance so it was, you know, 19 to 24 inches and had an average arrest force and then maximum arrest force. And class B was 19 to 54 inches and so forth. And so looking at this and sort of understanding this, you'll see and the other thing that I wanted to point out was the test weight changed. So when we now look at So this launched in 21. There was a February 1st date that we had to that manufacturers had to comply by. It has now been moved to August 1st of 2023. That manufacturers that are marking the unit that it meets that standard are going to have to comply with. So gone are Class A and Class B. So now we go to Class 1 and Class 2. And here's how I'll boil this down for you. Class 1 is directly overhead. If your SRL is directly over your head, that's a Class 1. Class 2 is everything else. So, and the reason for that is that a lot of times when we started looking at more of the information and what people were, using the equipment for, if you're anchoring below, other than directly overhead, you're ultimately creating a leading edge application. One of the things that you'll notice in all of this is the terminology leading edge is gone. So there isn't a -LE. You have Class 1 and you have Class 2. And so this is important in choosing the right tool for the job. So we always want to make sure that we choose the right tool for the job. And this hopefully will help people choose the right tool for the job instead of having terminology that maybe people either do understand or don't understand. And so the way that this standard was looked at was, what's the worst thing that somebody's going to do with this, and how can we, work towards preventing that? And that's kind of how all of them are starting to be looked at. And so Class 1, directly overhead. So if you have an application where you're going to put it directly overhead, great. Class 2, that's what you're going to look for if you're anchoring anywhere other than directly overhead. The test weight, so they had the test weight of 282 and 300 in the previous standard, and they went to just straight 310 pounds for the test weight. And you're going to see that start to kind of just be across the board, just so that we're kind of keeping consistency between all the different sections of the fall protection standards. So with the types, you will not see the -LE anymore. So you have SRL, so the self-retracting lanyard, like we've always had. You'll have the self-retracting lanyard personal, which is what we all know basically go on your back. And then the self-retracting with retrieval. So that goes with tripods and davit systems and things like that you'll see with that rescue capability. You'll also start to see, and this started back with lanyards, is where this white label with black lettering and black label with white lettering started with lanyards. And so they're trying to make it very easy for people to see and to look right at and go, okay, I know what that is. And keeping it standard across all the different subgroups within the standard. So you'll start to see these, and these are just things that you guys that are out in the field can look at and be able to say, okay, that's what that is. That's what, a lot of the changes that have gone within any of the standards, a lot of it isn't necessarily that important because it deals more with the people that are manufacturing them and what they have to do. So I tried to keep a lot of that out of this and really focus on how you can look at choosing the right tool for the job. And then the things that they kind of looked at as far as mark to identify, they have to have some markings on there, basically saying what the minimum setback distance is that you have to have for that, what the clearance calculation is. And one of the other things is that was done really, really well within the standard is the degrees. When you originally it was always you're allowed 30 degrees in any direction. Well, my 30 degrees might be different than somebody else's 30 degrees. It's like taking 5 people and say, walk out 10 feet. Nobody's going to end up at the same spot because they're all counting their feet. Right. And so they did a great job of, being able to lay out what the clearance is, what swing is, and what the degrees is. So this all has to be within the manual and on the SRL. And then you'll also see that all class 2 SRLs or SRDs have to come with a little orange card that basically states a warning about significant risk when you're attaching at foot level, because you're factoring, there's swing fall, that you have to factor in your clearance calculation is going to change. If there's a potential for you to fall off of an edge. So there's all kinds of things. And all of these things are important to understand when you're using the equipment, right? But that orange card has to be somewhere with the SRL. Now, this carried over, and it's one of the things that some people know that I do a lot of education. And I talk to a lot of people in the field. And one of the things that I've noticed, I spend a lot of time in the field, is that inspection is still one of the biggest issues that we have in the field, whether it's prior to use inspection or annual inspections or the documented inspections not being done properly, people not understanding what to look for. It's still one of the biggest issues that is out there in the field today. And I see it all the time. So across the board, we say that all equipment, fall protection equipment, has to be inspected prior to use. That's the law, right? And then it's annually by a competent person other than the user, except for SRLs. SRLs are based on their usage. So this graph is really, really important. And so the documented inspection, if you're using it all the time, needs to be done more than just annually. So any questions on SRLs? And one thing to note with SRLs is that and we talk about mobile elevated work platforms, I can't say it today for whatever reason. So, but you can't use a class 1 SRL in a mobile elevated work platform. It has to be a class 2 based on its anchorage. So it's important to note that, right? And that we want to start moving in the direction of, really looking at when we're moving in that we're in restraint rather than anything else. All right, chat. Over the height of the worker is what I mean. So overhead, so directly overhead, or anything over your head.
I got a question.
Fire away.
Are all class 2s leading edge now?
For all intents purposes, yeah.
Okay.
Because anytime that you're anchoring below, you're creating that leading edge application. And the terminology's gone out of the standard, but yeah, that's basically what it is.
All right.
So is that maximum 5 foot or 6 foot below your D ring in a class 2 situation?
Well, you're only 6 foot of free fall or 12. So if you're at your feet, it'll be 12.
So if you're tying to an anchor, if you're hooking off to an anchor point, your maximum would be 6 feet, because then you got additional 6 foot for considered as far as the personnel, correct? So it'd be 6, or does it be 12?
Well, it depends on what the manufacturer's arrest distance is with the SRL. Remember, SRLs lock off differently than if you were using a lanyard.
Okay.
Dan jumped in. He's helping me out. Yeah, it's 6 feet.
Quick question, Rebecca. You said in the mobile equipment work platform or aerial lifts, you use a class 2 SRL.
Yep.
And so you're basically you're using it under fall arrest. Is that correct? And not because this my question lies here because fall protection is either restraint, positioning device, or fall arrest. And if we use fall arrest, then our anchor point has to be 5,000. But if we use a restraint lanyard, now that only has to be 1,000 pounds of anchor force. And I'm not quite sure if on some aerial lifts they can support 5,000, but they can support 1,000 if you tie off to the correct anchor point. I've in the past, what I've heard is that when you're in an aerial lift, you want to be maintained inside the basket. So the better thing to do is to use a restraint. And then you only have to, the anchor point only has to be 1,000 and not 5,000.
Yep, correct. You're correct. So especially when you're moving, we want that restraint. Now it's based on the manufacturer of the mobile work platform, right? But restraint is always the better option.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep. Anybody else?
What about on the mobile elevating work platforms? If you have the restraint system, but you only have a number of anchor points for the entanglement part of it, how does that work? You're having 2 people maximum. Some baskets even allow you to have 3. What do you do with the restraint system? How do you hook those up when you only have, subject to, I don't know, 8 anchor points in different directions in the basket?
Well, I think it depends on what restraint system you're using.
Okay.
Rebecca, you said this was going to go into effect in August
Yep.
2023?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it was February 1st, and then they extended it to August 1st of 2023. So one of the things that I heard when I was in Massachusetts, it was one of the interesting things, is that with this standard, there's quite a few, I've heard quite a few comments about that you have to get rid of all your equipment because the standard is changing. That is not true. There is a document directly from ANSI. We put it on the Fall Protection Council page on SAIA. So if you want to download it, you can. That basically states that just because the standard changed doesn't mean that you have to get rid of all of your equipment and change over. However, if you're replacing anything, it's just, at the end of the day, this is more about choosing the right tool for the job than anything else, right? And understanding what you have and making sure that you are using the right tool for the job. But just because a new standard comes out doesn't mean that all of your equipment needs to be replaced. Anybody else? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And you guys all know you can reach out to me if you have anything beyond this, if you think of anything later. So harnesses, there was a minor change within that standard that came out in 2021, and you'll start seeing it eventually here. The pictograms came back. We had them for a long time, they disappeared and they came back. And this is just to kind of help people look at on the label. It should tell you all the things that the harness has the capability of, you know, being able to do. So if it's marked with, you can use it for work positioning, go for it. If it's a harness that isn't, and you start hooking up a bunch of stuff to it and it's not designed for it, well, it's not going to work the same way. So we put the pictograms back in. And then one of the standards that came out in 2021 is a brand new standard, and it doesn't really apply to too many people, but it does apply to some people within SAIA, and that is controlled descent devices. And all they really did was they just kind of separated it from rescue and have sort of laid out the definition of descent control devices, and basically being automatic versus manual. And then the rest is really, this is a better picture of it. The rest is really up to, you know, it's different for the manufacturers, but manual controlled descent devices versus automatic was probably the biggest thing and change, other than the fact that this is a brand new standard that wasn't there before. So, like I said, this is pretty quick, not super crazy. But it's really to try to hone in on helping everybody choose the right tool for the job, so that everybody stays safe while they're out there. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one quick question.
Fire away.
How does OSHA in terms of controlled descent devices or
Yep.
descent control devices, how you know, is OSHA has anybody talked to OSHA about allowing those in lieu of fall arrest?
Not that I'm aware of. Right
Is-
now, you have to have both.
Okay. Okay.
Because if you think about it, you have your primary, and you, so that you always have a primary and you always have a secondary. So primary is always me, right? And then if something else becomes my primary, like work positioning could become my primary, or a controlled descent device could become my primary, because now I'm literally suspended in midair and I'm, you know, either controlling it or it's automatic. And then I still have to have a backup system in case that were to fail.
Mhm.
And even in SPRAT and IRATA, they still have to have a backup system when they're in controlled descent.
So like wind tower rescue or you know, escape
Yeah.
sort of systems, they wouldn't typically have a fall arrest system as well.
Well,
So-
it depends. If it's evacuation, no. It's a life-threatening situation. Load and go.
Okay.
But when they're working, they always have they always have their fall arrest on. And the rescue, all you're doing is transferring one system to another, and then you're lowering them down.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they'll still stay on some sort of fall arrest in the wind industry. If it's on the inside, if it's on the outside, not necessarily. The regulations state that they still need to back them up, but OSHA it gets a little gray when it comes to rescue.
Yeah. 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 So we'd had, you know, inside of let's say like a boiler,
Mhm.
where if the person winds up hanging from their fall arrest line, you know, like a vertical safety line, now you got to figure out how to get up there and get at them. And if they were operating let's say if they were on a swing stage and one of the primary ropes failed or whatever, and the guy's hanging from his safety line, how do you go up there and rescue it? Unless you can actually lower him from up above.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty easy to do that, actually.
Well,
If you can get to
yeah,
where
no,
they're
you gotta
headed
have,
to,
you gotta have a
Okay.
system in place to do that.
correct.
And
But
then
by
it-
law, you have to have a rescue plan, right?
yes, yeah. Well, we've had people say, "Oh, we're just gonna get a couple guys up there and lower them by hand," and it's like, yeah, go try to do that.
Let me know how that works out.
But we, you know, one of the things that was proposed was actually using like a descent control system instead,
Mhm.
because you're not, but it was like, well, you can't do that because they want fall arrest, which means you're stopping the fall as opposed to allowing them to continue to fall only at a specific, at a specific speed.
I see.
And
what you're saying.
and inside of a boiler, you're not likely to come down on top of something that's going to, injure you. It's not like you're going to wind up going into wind up on a bunch of rebar sticking up out of a concrete slab or something like that.
Yeah,
So, but it was, basically shot down because of the need to actually stop the guy's fall. So anyway, I was just curious if, if with the developments, because this is the first time Z359 has addressed these.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, okay. Just curious.
yeah. Anybody else?
It looks like we have a question in the chat.
Oh. Sorry. Uh, Standard has been pushed back until August. Is it the class 1 and class 2 SRD? Yeah, it's been pushed back to August 1st. And you're starting to see manufacturers already come out labeled with the class 1 and class 2.
Any indication that it may push again?
Not that I've heard of. I mean, I would think that after the 2 extensions that people, that should be plenty of time.
We had another question. What is the process of getting older SLRs up to the new code?
I don't think that you'll see. If it's a bigger one, you can send it back in, but it depends on what the manufacturers have to do to meet the testing. That I don't think you'll see them be able to retrofit an older unit to make it. But that's not to say that they might not. Like every manufacturer is different and they may or may not do that. That's going to be up to the manufacturers. And if it's bigger than 20 feet or whatever, then they'll have to within these. What is required? Any guidance with yes, there's actually within the standard. Sorry, I just digressed completely, but yes. So I don't know if it'll all depend on the manufacturers if they will allow. If something comes in to get recertified, if they'll send it back out with the new, or if they'll send it back out with old labeling. It really depends on the manufacturers. There's label changes, but there are manufacturers that are going to have to make changes to the units in order to pass the new testing criteria, especially when you add a different weight in there. So, and every manufacturer is different, so it's going to be different.
How you doing, Sammy? Demo. Have a few minutes?
I did.
Yeah, because I went to go talk to Christina.
Christina? Okay.
Yeah, so I got a kind of proposal and she says it was good
Oh, okay.
for the classes.
So she's
Jackie,
trying
I
to
don't know
make
who his
changes?
phone is.
Well, the thing is that
that I had to make.
Not
sure
on
that,
mute.
little changes
Okay.
that might work. I don't know how they're gonna affect.
There, I think I got it. And then the other, I got it. Took me a second to figure it out. And then under Z359.14 is within the inspections is their guidance. Both the manufacturers will have guidance on what you should be looking for, as well as in the standard. There is information, but the manufacturers should have that in the manual or anywhere on their website. You should be able to get all that information fairly easily.
Oh my gosh, sorry about that. Literally my mouse died and I couldn't mute that person because my mouse was dead and I had to find a battery. So sorry about that, everybody.
No, it's okay. I finally figured it out. I was like, oh. So, anyone else? Anything else? Anything I can help with? Hopefully that helped and wasn't way more confusing than it needed to be. I tried to keep it really simple.
Great
And
job,
we
Rebecca.
will
We
have,
appreciate it.
oh, sorry, Jim. I was just gonna say that we will have this available on our YouTube channel and I'll send it out to everyone that registered. So yeah, I'll edit that as soon as we're done here and try to get it out today. We'll see how good I am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
All right, have a great day, everybody.
Rebecca.
Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you, bye. Yep.